FBI sparking calls for a congressional investigation. Another one. New hour starts right now. I'm Bill Hemmer, live in New York. How you doing? Welcome
I'm doing
back.
Great. Nice to be here. I'm Heather Childers in for Sandra Smith. You know, President Trump's suggesting that some key officials involved in the Russia investigation were engaged in treasonous behavior based on Andrew McCabe's blockbuster interview with 60 Minutes. Senator Lindsey Graham vowing to expose the truth.
There's an allegation by the acting FBI director at the time that the Deputy Attorney General was basically trying to do an administrative coup, take the president down through the 25th Amendment process. The Deputy Attorney General denies it. So I promise your viewers the following, that we will have a hearing about who's telling the truth, what actually happened.
Well, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live for us in Washington with more. Catherine?
Thank you, Heather, and good morning. When you take a deep dive, there are inconsistencies between McCabe's CBS interview and congressional testimony by the FBI's former top lawyer over how far discussions went over the 25th Amendment. On 60 Minutes, McCabe said the Deputy Attorney General raised the issue and support in a preliminary way.
Rosenstein was actually openly talking about whether there was a majority of the cabinet who would vote to remove the president.
That's correct. Counting votes or possible votes.
Did he assign specific votes to specific people?
No, not that I recall.
This video is from October, and it shows the former FBI General Counsel James Baker, who testified behind closed doors about his conversations with McCabe and another FBI lawyer about what Rosenstein had said. Baker told House investigators he believed Rosenstein's 25th Amendment efforts went further. Fox News has confirmed sections of the Baker transcript. Quote, "I had the impression that the Deputy Attorney General had already discussed this with two members in the president's cabinet and that they were on board with this concept already." Baker also testified that he believed the wire and 25th Amendment discussions amount to two separate initiatives. The wire was designed to gather evidence for a potential obstruction of justice case against the president for firing FBI Director James Comey.
What do you hear for Democrats that are supporting the hearings of their own for same reasons or similar?
Well, Bill, Fox News first reported Thursday that the powerful chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham, was willing to subpoena Rosenstein and other witnesses over the 25th Amendment discussions and allegations Rosenstein offered to wear a wire. A senior Senate Democrat now says he's on board for his own reasons.
It is alarming that there were apparently folks at the highest levels of our government considering whether or not our president is unfit to serve. I don't think that this, frankly, rises to the level of some deep state conspiracy or a serious attempt at what Senator Graham called an administrative coup.
House Republicans who have tracked the testimony from McCabe and other senior FBI and DOJ officials for over a year emphasized that the former acting director said he had grave concerns about President Trump, yet he also wanted to be the new head of the bureau after his old boss James Comey was fired by the president.
Andy McCabe was one of 4 people to walk into the Oval Office and interview with Donald Trump to become the FBI director. So how do you go from, I think you're an agent of the Russian government committing treason, to 8 days later, I think you're an agent of the Russian government committing treason, but I'd sure love a job working for you every day.
McCabe, who was fired for lying to investigators over a media leak, had his case referred to the U.S. attorney here in Washington for possible criminal prosecution, though it's not publicly known the status of that case. Bill and Heather.
All right, lots more to come on this. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. We're going to bring in our A-team right now. Emily Campagno, attorney and Fox News contributor. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you.
Chris Stirewalt, Fox News politics editor, fresh off the train. And Robert Wolf, former economic advisor to President Obama and Fox News contributor. Nice to see you all. You watched last night. You saw 2 pretty big segments, I would say about 35 minutes in length. What did you think about last night? Did you learn something, or was there a little bit of chicken left on that bone?
I think that Andrew McCabe has perfectly demonstrated that he is the star graduate of the James Comey School of Public Service. Self-serving, self-seeking. The very fact, it occurred to me, we are watching a restoration at the Department of Justice. We're bringing back the former AG Barr, who is now back in charge there. Mueller is at work. Rosenstein is at work. The old school is back. Comey's tenure and McCabe's tenure at the Department of Justice have been borne out now to be pretty dire. And I was just seized by that thought watching him talk.
So, I mean, I was wondering what should happen next, because we hear Lindsey Graham coming out. He's saying, we have to investigate this, and they were breaking the law. And even in thinking that they would possibly go in and talk to the president with a wire on.
Exactly. And we now know that there are hearings, that there's been calls for hearings to determine to get to the root of that. And what's going to happen when everyone testifies under oath that they're sticking to their two sides of the story? I think what struck me about that interview is, again, that Comey graduation, but the woe is me victim mentality. So we had McCabe say he refused to acknowledge the IG results, whether or not there will be charges brought criminally, and said, well, that's a selective presentation of evidence, clearly to achieve the results the president is calling for. And then later on, he said, this has a chilling effect, my termination before my retirement vested, on the members of the FBI that were just trying to do the right thing. And then, as you said earlier, the fact that then his spokeswoman came out and kind of denied things that he said.
Sort of revealing, I think, a little bit, too. Yeah. What did you think of last night?
Yeah, so I'm going to break it down personally and politically. Politically speaking, as a Dem, I'd love to see Lindsey Graham go have a whole debate on the 25th Amendment. I don't think it's great for the country, but sure, you want to have that debate, go for it. I think all Democrats would applaud that. I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. With respect to personally, I can't stand when these FBI agents are speaking about their time and working for the country. I didn't like it when Comey was speaking, and I don't like it when McCabe's speaking. And I think that, I think we're watching him being pitted against Rosenstein, and then therefore Wray needs to get in, and Barr will need to get in.
But none of their stories match up. This is a confounding factor here.
It's not. I don't like it.
Play soundbite number 1 from last night, then I've got a specific question for you. Watch here.
Discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
What seemed to be coursing through the mind of the Deputy Attorney General was getting rid of the President of the United States.
Well,
one way or another.
I can't confirm that, but what I can say is the Deputy Attorney General was definitely very concerned about the President, about his capacity, and about his intent at that point in time.
So very earnest, right? And what did you say? Self-seeking? Was that the word you used? And then, Emily, you mentioned this. I've brought it up a couple times already. I just want to, again, put this on screen. So McCabe does the interview. He writes the book, and then a spokeswoman comes out and says this. To clarify, at no time did Mr. McCabe participate in any extended discussions about the use of the 25th Amendment, nor is he aware of any such discussions. Where does that leave this story if you put out a statement essentially denying it?
He's got no cred, and it's not going to work for him. Look, if it becomes a test of he said between McCabe, who the Inspector General's report found, by the way, we should point out, in McCabe's version of everything, everyone else is corrupt, everybody else is lying, everybody else is wrong, and he and James Comey are the only two good guys left at the top. And I just have a really hard time with that concept. But if you're going to pit Rod Rosenstein against McCabe, Rosenstein's going to win that one because Rosenstein still has the cred. People still believe him. He's still a credible person. And you know who's very happy today? Rod Rosenstein is very happy today. We have a new attorney general, and he finally gets to quit. He finally gets to go home and quit having, well, he'll have to be back,
you mentioned it on the Bill Barr thing. Kimberly Strauss of Wall Street Journal. Here's the headline. He arrives at a Justice Department that is in desperate need of infusion of credibility. I think her key line is overriding challenge is a rebooted Justice Department that's shredded its reputation and lost the confidence of Congress and the public. That starts soon.
Yeah, I think, listen, this is a tough question for me because, certainly I like Barr more than Sessions and I like Barr more than Whitaker. As a Democrat, I'm not sure he would have been my choice, but certainly, I would agree with Chris. It is time to literally have the Department of Justice and the FBI not be this, sieve of leaks continually. I think as an American, this is not what we're looking for the FBI and the Department of Justice to be.
His point about the credibility is just, it's in tatters.
It is, and Bill Barr certainly has his work cut out for him, and obviously we are championing him to clean house. And I think what struck me about that piece as well was the line about the cronyism, right? And I think with all of us mired in the details and in these micro details, we failed to take that step back, which is essentially that, yes, how was Hillary Clinton's counsel able to get the FBI general counsel on the phone? Why is that courtesy not extended to all Americans? How is that level of participation and political clout, why is that afforded at that top and not to everyone else? So I really, I found that striking. And I think that's something looking forward to for me. that level of, again, that House is cleaned.
I want to go back to you, Chris, in reference to, the discrepancies in these stories, including the statement from McCabe's spokesperson. We also had, back in the fall, James Baker testifying that McCabe had told him at the time, with conversations between McCabe and Lisa Page, that there were these two people who were willing to support the 25th Amendment.
Look, I think that what you get down to is what was the, and McCabe talked about it, intent. So if people are sitting around having an abstract discussion, and I want to say that was a weird week. If you remember how weird that week was, and the handwritten letter from the president, and Comey's already in L.A., and they try to fire him, but he's already gone, and then he's got to fly back.
Helicopter aerial shots.
It was OJ. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I have no idea what hypothetical conversations took place at the FBI. I have no idea what hypothetical conversations took place any place else. But I do know this. Rod Rosenstein has come out of this all looking pretty good and coming out pretty clean. Rosenstein looks like he kept Trump's confidence. Trump didn't fire him. He navigated these very rocky shoals for months on end when everybody was against him, and he figured out a way to get through it.
Just to add to that, I think Chris Wray looks like the adult in the room. I think for all Americans, I think we're very glad.
Kimberly Strassel says Mr. Barr needs this job like he needs a hole in the head.
Hopefully he'll do it effectively, though. And I just think the larger point, again, is did these political affiliations and these kind of now, is this a coup attempt? Did it affect and impede the investigation, right? Because all we heard for so long was that it didn't. And now it seems to me
Lindsey Graham wants to find out. Thank you, guys. Come on back in about 30 minutes, okay? Emily? Do it.
Well, Democratic candidates, I should say, for the White House hitting the campaign trail, making some pitches in some early battleground states with more than 600 days to go before the presidential election. Peter Doocy's following all that for us, live from Nassau, New Hampshire, where Senator Cory Booker is today. Peter, so how is Senator Booker trying to set himself apart from the other Democrats? Because that's what they need to do right now.
And he's got a big crowd to hear him this morning on President's Day. Look at this, to get into a house party in Nashua to see the senator who just walked in. But at all of his events here in the First in the Nation state the last couple of days, he's been trying to keep his campaign focused on love.
People tell me if you're going to beat Trump, you got to bring it. Well, I believe in bringing it, but not bringing more of what Trump is bringing. Because in many ways, that's what he wants.
But President Trump has zeroed in on Senator Booker in the last couple of months, specifically his record as mayor. The president says that he thinks Booker ran Newark into the ground as the mayor.
Well, you got to talk about paying for all this. And so have any of the candidates started talking about how to pay for their progressive proposals?
Yes, at a town hall down in South Carolina this weekend, Senator Kamala Harris was asked by a constituent down there how exactly she would pay for the Green New Deal and Medicare for All when the United States has a $22 trillion debt hanging over everything. And Senator Harris said essentially that she would do that by rolling back one of President Trump's signature accomplishments.
We have a tax bill that got passed that gave $1 trillion to the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America. And they need to give that money back.
Also on the trail this weekend, Elizabeth Warren, who went to the desert to look for early support. She rallied in Las Vegas, where waves of foreclosures following the financial crisis affected residents as much as anywhere else in America. Her focus continues to be on income inequality, but that's not necessarily the focus of everybody that turned up to her events. In Georgia, at a different stop, she was dogged by questions about her confusing stories of her ancestry, and somebody in the crowd started shouting out, "Why did you lie?" Heather.
All right. Thank you much, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Dramatic new turn over the weekend involving the alleged hate crime on the actor Jussie Smollett. Why investigators say the story is now changing. We'll get to that coming up here. Heather?
That's interesting. Also, Democratic infighting after Amazon pulls out of a deal to set up shop in New York City. Why the mayor is saying Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others got the math wrong.
Also, you're going to hear the president talking about this today in Florida. There was chaos in Venezuela, the embattled president clinging to power, the White House plan to end this crisis. Next.
In terms of the solution, there absolutely is a solution. It's a very simple solution. It's called free and fair elections. What is happening in Venezuela is a man-made crisis of epic proportions, not caused by a natural disaster, but by a man-made one. A criminal regime that is willing to starve and kill its own people before it gives up power. Over 50 countries stand with the people of Venezuela, and we will not abandon you. So long as you are on the side of freedom and liberty, the world and America will stand with you.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio reassuring Venezuelans that humanitarian aid will get to them as the U.S. continues to ramp up pressure on the disputed President Nicolas Maduro. Washington announcing several sanctions on top oil company executives. Meanwhile, President Trump is flying to Miami this afternoon to speak with Venezuelan immigrants there, and he's reiterating his support for opposition leader Juan Guaido and renewing calls for Maduro's resignation.
Now we get to Charles. Here we go.
Even though I know these tears come with pain.
Markets are closed, but this man's still working.
Like that music.
The New York City liberal mayor, Bill de Blasio, is criticizing the New York liberal Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Says she doesn't quite understand economics. A lot of this goes back to Amazon and the fact that the company came out last week and said, we're turning tail on New York City. The mayor went on NBC on Sunday and said this. Watch.
It seems a lot of people think that when you give a tax incentive, that somehow that's money you had over here and it was going over there. This is money that didn't exist, this $3 billion.
Correct. That $3 billion would go back in tax incentives was only after we were getting the jobs and getting
There's not $3 billion in money that exists anywhere, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we now, buddy?
Well, you know, he did go on, Mayor de Blasio, to put the lion's share of the blame on Amazon. So obviously Democrats are concerned because not only was this a huge mistake, but fractions within the party have become very visible. And the sort of idea that they're eating their own, that they're moved so far to the left, that sort of this identity politics, social justice being the core root of everything. By the way, it has been the core root of everything, even when President Obama was in office, of economic policy. The core always revolved around some form of social justice. So it's come back to bite New York City really badly for billions and billions of dollars, and it's also revealed that there's some really bad, serious issues within that political party.
Well, his argument was, but de Blasio, was that AOC didn't understand that they would not receive these tax credits until the jobs were in place.
Right.
Is that true?
Well, yeah, it's tax breaks, right? So you have to be able to generate, it's incentives and breaks. So it wasn't that they were going to cut a check. They weren't going to say, hey, Amazon, thanks, welcome, meet them at Kennedy Airport and hand them a check for $3 billion. But, what AOC is saying is that it doesn't matter. If you can find any way to generate money for the richest man in the world, you should be able to find ways to generate money for other things. And let's face it also, they're worried about things like gentrification, whether the people who live there now will be able to afford it. Those are the sort of minute things that are driving, and I don't mean to dismiss it, but they are the kind of things that are driving this party and sort of wreck this deal, but you wonder how many more deals it's going to wreck.
Do you think this is over? I think they're sort of negotiating with the public statements they made over the past week. You think it's over?
Amazon is in a real delicate position because almost everyone dislikes Amazon outside of the service they provide.
A lot of consumers who love Amazon.
Consumers love them, but whether they're grouped in with big tech behaving badly over the last couple of years, and it's opened them up to more regulations, more taxes, and more attacks from both sides of the aisle. So they're in an awfully
I don't think it's over.
Position.
That's what I'm saying. I think Jeff Bezos still wants the human capital that he can get in New York City.
See, you're making a great point. There aren't a lot of places that have what New York City has. Bottom line, if you need 25,000 people who have the certain skill set, you want to be near universities, you want to be near a great transportation system, you want to go somewhere where you're not going to totally upend the local real estate picture. There are very few places like that he can go. So you're right. And I think another part of this beef was that the local politicians, smaller politicians, the Queensboro president, Alexandria Ocasio, they weren't brought into the negotiation process too. We have seen this kind of thing before, time and time again. Some egos hurt. Some, hey, you know what? You're on my turf. I'll make you pay. Don't overlook the power that we have.
All right. Mick Mulvaney is saying deregulation is the highest priority. Just got about a minute for this. But deregulation has been a high priority for this administration for 2 years now.
It has been. Over the first 22 months of this administration, you've seen 176 what they call deregulatory actions, So what we've seen is 65% fewer regulations under this administration than we saw under President Obama. Over 50%.
The economy, would you agree?
Oh my goodness! It's again, that's because a lot of the regulatory regime prior to this was not based on economics, not even based on things like climate change. Even though they might have thrown those names in them, it was really punitive. It was all about punishing success, punishing big business. They were all under the guise of economics or maybe clean water, but ultimately they were all designed to shake down or harm big businesses, and they did a good job.
And the president said that he would cut, what, 2 for every new one, and he managed to do, what, 12?
And out of the gate, it was remarkable. The numbers were remarkable. They call what they call significant regulations that cost $100 million or more. 465 under Bush, 647 under President Obama, and only 229 under Donald Trump. So they've kept their promise, but there's a lot more room to go.
Thank you, buddy. Markets are closed. Do you get withdrawal on days like this?
I do. I do. I was watching the Chinese market all night. By the way, I'm big on anticipation of some more progress this week when the Chinese delegation comes to D.C.
They've been way down. Right.
Oh, no, not this year. Not this year, though.
The Chinese market.
Oh, the Chinese market. It's a disaster. Unmitigated disaster. Up 12%, 11% this year.
Catch you later, okay?
All right, see you later.
Thank you.
Charles Payne.
Yes. Well, the White House and its allies defending the president's move to handle the situation at the border, but some Republicans see a tough fight ahead.
It's going to go to court. We're going to find out. There's going to be resolutions in both the House and Senate to disapprove of what the president's doing. I think they'll pass.
Our headliner weighs in on the battle over the border wall. Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy joins us up next.
Also, we'll hear directly from the White House. Strategic Communications Director Mercedes Schlapp is here. So tell us why the White House is confident it will ultimately build the wall as promised.
It's stunning to me that one of the chief law enforcement officers of the land, the acting head of the FBI, would go on national television and say, oh, by the way, I remember a conversation with the Deputy Attorney General about trying to find if we could replace the president under the 25th Amendment. We're a democracy. People enforce the law, can't take it in their own hands. And was this an attempted bureaucratic coup?
Lindsey Graham is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, vowing to investigate the comments made by Andrew McCabe. He wants him to testify. McCabe claiming high-level talks, Justice Department, FBI, about ways to move the president from office. Andy McCarthy, former Assistant U.S. Attorney, Fox News contributor, watched it last night. Wrote a very interesting piece today. And Andy, welcome back to America's Newsroom today. What did you think?
Bill, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Did you learn anything last night that we need to understand now, Andy?
Well, a couple of things. I think, number one, it confirms what I've been arguing for a very long time, which is that the investigation was always about President Trump, and it was going on for many months before May of 2017. I think all that happened in that 9-day period between the time that Comey was fired by the president and Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, appointed Mueller, all that happened at that period of time is that the Bureau went overt in its case filing system to say that they were opening a case officially on President Trump, but they had been investigating him for a very long time before then, under the auspices of counterintelligence, hoping to be able to make a case on him.
So then does that mean that obviously Comey lied when he said that the president was not the focus of the investigation? When he told the president that he was not?
I think it was very misleading, Heather, to tell him that he was not the focus of the investigation, but I think it was something they felt like they had to do if they were going to persist in the investigation. If they had gone to the president when he was president-elect in January 6th, and when they gave him a very crimped briefing on the Steele dossier, if they had gone beyond the salacious parts of the dossier and said to him, oh, and by the way, Mr. President, we're also conducting an investigation of you and your campaign to see if you were conspiring in Russia's cyber espionage operation. They had to fear that the president would think that was absurd and would shut the investigation down. So I think the way they persisted in the investigation was to try to make Trump feel comfortable with it, which was to say, you are not a suspect of the investigation. We're looking at people in the campaign. And that way, the way the investigation was structured, by looking at the campaign, they would necessarily get any evidence there was against President Trump. So they would get the evidence anyway, but they were able to look him in the eye and tell him he wasn't a suspect.
We had Dershowitz on last hour. I just want you to listen to this from the professor.
I think McCabe and Rod Rosenstein really believed that the president had obstructed justice. I think they were wrong, but they honestly believed it, and they were looking for a way, short of impeachment, to remove him from office. I think any law enforcement official who thinks that the 25th Amendment operates in a case like this is disqualified from serving in government.
My hunch is you don't disagree with that, but I was looking at the evidence that McCabe was laying out last night in the interview. The dossier did not come up a lot in that segment last night. 2 segments, I should say. But he talked about firing Comey, the Russian diplomats meeting in the Oval Office, talked about Putin telling Trump that North Korea's missiles cannot reach the continental United States. So if you stack that up, that was the circumstantial evidence that McCabe was going on to think that the president was a Russian agent and wanted to shut down the investigation of the election.
Yeah, well, 2 things about that, Bill. Number one, of course they didn't mention the Steele dossier because they're embarrassed by the Steele dossier. They haven't been able to corroborate it. But it actually was the information they had that overtly, affirmatively said that there was a conspiracy between Trump and Russia. And notice another one of the things that McCabe went back to was the February of 2017 discussion between Trump and Comey about the Mike Flynn investigation, where McCabe suggested that he had obstructed, that is, the president had obstructed their investigation by essentially telling Comey to lay off Flynn. Again, I think that underscores what I've been saying all along, which was it wasn't May 17th when they were first starting to make a case against the president. This had been going on for a very long time.
Let's bring this up. This is what Jason Chaffetz had to say on FoxNews.com and get you to respond to this. He said that FBI's Andrew McCabe should be on trial, not a book tour. For a time, McCabe was the acting director of the FBI. He, of all people, knew the rules, the law, had a duty and a responsibility to tell the truth, and yet his colleagues found he lied. In fact, he accomplished something federal employees rarely accomplish. He was ultimately fired for his offenses. So why should we be listening to anything he has to say?
Well, look, I think the Justice Department is looking at McCabe's conduct in connection with the investigation that the Inspector General did of the leak that McCabe orchestrated to the Wall Street Journal and then allegedly lied about when he was interviewed by FBI agents. What I think, Heather, is that the Inspector General and the Justice Department are also looking at other aspects of the FBI's investigation of the Clinton emails case and the Trump-Russia case, and they will probably deal with McCabe in due course. I think they want to get through everything that the Inspector General is looking at first, and then they'll probably make a decision on whether to prosecute McCabe or not.
Andy, quickly, I want to go to this other topic about the national emergency. The California Democratic AG was on the Sunday shows. Here's how he characterized it in terms of fighting this national emergency.
He himself said it. He did not need to announce or declare a crisis. He did not have to call this an emergency. He has also said he knows he's going to lose in court, and he's hoping that he can count on a conservative court in the Supreme Court to give him a victory because he knows he's going to lose all the way up the ladder.
Javier Becerra from yesterday. What they're hanging on the words from the Rose Garden on Friday when the president talked about, I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And sort of the court cases that he mentioned that ultimately would be decided by the Supreme Court where he believes he will win. Your reflection on that?
Yeah, well, I think, number one, it was a bad thing for the president to say. If you're going to go out and declare an emergency, you can't be making statements that undercut that premise. But I think what the president was commenting about And what the legislator is commenting about is the sense that it's a politicized process even in the courts. That is that, you know, the court, the people who are going against the declaration are going to go into courts that seem like they're inclined or predisposed to rule against the president. And ultimately, the president hopes that the case will get to the Supreme Court where he'll get what he hopes is a fair shake.
Andy, thank you. Andy McCarthy, our
Thanks.
headliner today. You bet. Nice to see you again. Thank you, sir. 22 minutes left before the hour. All right. Go.
Lots to go over. Fox News alert for you right now, though. Kim Jong-un will reportedly arrive in Vietnam 2 days ahead of his second summit with President Trump. The two leaders scheduled to meet in Hanoi February 27th and 28th. Kim's visit will be the first by a North Korean leader in more than 50 years. Kitty Logan is live for us with more on this from our London bureau. Hi, Kitty.
Hi, Heather. So, yes, it looks as if Kim Jong-un is set to arrive in Hanoi on February 25th already. And according to these reports, he will also meet with the Vietnamese president ahead of that summit with President Trump. Now, normally, Kim Jong-un is fairly secretive about his movements, and these details are still to be confirmed. He was last seen on state TV over the weekend, attending ceremonies to mark the birth date of his late father. Now, North Korea is still pushing for sanctions to be lifted, but the US wants firmer commitments from Pyongyang first. And so it is keeping up the pressure on the North ahead of this summit. We saw troops from the US, South Korea and Thailand taking part in a regional military exercise on Saturday at a Thai naval base. This is part of an annual international exercise in the region, not directly related to the summit, but it shows the US and South Korean troops are still cooperating militarily despite objections from Pyongyang. Now, this upcoming summit in Hanoi that follows a meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un in Singapore last June. Already, the US North Korean Special Envoy Stephen Biegun is due to arrive in Hanoi on Tuesday to discuss the agenda for this upcoming summit with the North Korean officials there. In Singapore, the two sides agreed in principle to work towards halting North Korea's nuclear weapons program. But of course, the details of implementing that agreement have stalled somewhat since that summit. What's hoped for now out of this second summit is there will be some kind of progress and a little bit more of a commitment from North Korea. Heather.
All right. Kitty Logan live for us. Thank you.
In a moment here, a new twist in the case of an alleged hate crime that involves the actor Jussie Smollett. Why police are now saying the direction of the
Lots of folks talking about this. Some new questions emerging in the case of an alleged hate crime attack against Empire actor Jussie Smollett. Police say that they're now shifting the focus of their investigation. So let's bring our A-team back in on all of this. You know, it really is remarkable when you talk about how all of this began and where we are now, and the amount of people that immediately jumped out and had something to say about it.
You're an attorney. How do you look at it?
Yeah, well, I want to point out for viewers that, you know, in some states, this is classified filing a false police report, should that end up to be the case, it's considered a crime against public justice. And that's how seriously we take these false allegations, and especially in the realm of an alleged hate crime. And then obviously the flip side, and what's so unfortunate to me is how quickly that narrative was pushed, and that the response to, well, if this didn't happen is, well, but it's happening elsewhere, right? And it totally, there's a lack of accountability.
Do you think they go to a grand jury for this investigation? Because what Smollett said is that he stands by his story so far.
Yeah,
through his attorneys, he
is. I think we will see. I think it depends on the level of evidence that is being gathered right now. As we just saw, the shift has focused. I mean, the focus has shifted.
That too.
And depending on the amount of evidence and what is uncovered during that time, then it might be referred for a grand jury.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope it's accurate that he was telling the truth, that he was attacked by, not that I ever want anyone attacked, but that he was attacked, and it was based on racial and LGBTQ slurs and hate. If it's not accurate, I don't believe all of a sudden that there isn't race issues in America and there aren't hate crime issues in America, and I don't think it shifts. It's about an individual, whether he is telling the truth or not, but it should not change the dialogue we're having that we need.
But if it's not true, it should not stand.
Absolutely.
Chris.
So the Stirewaltian rule is ironclad and is absolute. Opinions are luxury items. Don't have more than you can afford. And whether it's the Covington Catholic case, whether it's the story of Justin Fairfax, whether it's this, we have these controversies, and now, because we carry computers in our pockets that allow us to be stupid faster, and everybody has to vomit forth their opinion on every matter, and then after the fact, to Emily's point, then we have to reverse engineer an explanation why, well, maybe I'm really right, or maybe there's a larger discussion here. In fact, just wait. Just wait. Do a Sudoku.